Project Blue Book, Vietnam, the UFO war that both sides tried to hide. Welcome back to Untold Vietnam Chronicles, where we uncover the most classified and mind-bending stories from a war that was far stranger than anyone imagined. Tonight, we're diving into one of the most heavily classified aspects of the Vietnam conflict, a phenomenon so disturbing that both American and North Vietnamese forces agreed to hide it from the world. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button for more incredible stories that reveal the hidden dimensions of modern warfare. Like this video if you want to discover how an unidentified aerial phenomena turned the Vietnam War into humanity's first documented UFO conflict. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love connecting with our global community of truth seekers. Now prepare yourself, because tonight we're exploring Project Blue Book Vietnam, the classified investigation into extraterrestrial encounters that terrified soldiers on both sides and may have influenced the outcome of the war itself. Chapter 1. The night the sky went silent. 5 Charlie, 20 kilometers northwest of Saigon. At 2:47 hours, every piece of electronic equipment in the base simultaneously failed. Radios went dead, radar screens went blank, and even mechanical watches stopped working. Staff Sergeant Michael Thompson was on perimeter duty when the silence fell. In his report to military intelligence, Thompson described the experience as like someone had turned off the entire universe. The constant background noise of generators, radio chatter, and distant artillery suddenly ceased, leaving an unnatural quiet that seemed to press against the eardrums. What happened next would change Thompson's life and launch one of the most classified investigations of the Vietnam War. At 249 hours, 3 lights appeared in the sky above 5 Charlie. The lights were described by multiple witnesses as being roughly triangular in formation, brilliant white in color, and completely silent. They moved with a precision and speed that defied conventional aircraft capabilities, making 90-degree turns without deceleration and hovering motionless for extended periods. But what truly terrified the witnesses was what the lights did to the base's defensive system. Every weapon on the 5 base, from M16 rifles to 100 mm Bala howitzers, became completely inoperable. Ammunition wouldn't fire, mechanical systems seized, and even hand grenades failed to detonate when their pins were pulled. For 23 minutes, 5 Charlie was completely defenseless, its 200 soldiers unable to respond to any threat. Thompson attempted to photograph the lights using a standard military camera, but the film was later found to be completely blank despite the camera functioning normally before and after the incident. At 2200 fires, the lights departed with instantaneous acceleration that left no exhaust trail or sonic signature. As soon as they disappeared, all electronic and mechanical systems resumed normal operation without any apparent damage or residual effect. The official report classified the incident as equipment malfunction due to atmospheric electrical phenomena. But Thompson's detailed account, along with testimony from 47 other witnesses, was forwarded to a classified military unit that most people had never heard of. Project Blue Book Vietnam. Chapter 2. The Pentagon's Secret UFO War. Project Blue Book Vietnam was established in early 1967 as a joint operation between the Air Force Office of Special Investigations and the Defense Intelligence Agency. Unlike the civilian-oriented Project Blue Book that investigated UFO reports in the United States, the Vietnam operation was focused specifically on an unidentified aerial phenomena that affected military operation. The project was classified at the highest levels and operated under cover identities that made it invisible even to most military intelligence personnel. Team members were officially assigned to various conventional military units, while secretly investigating incidents that conventional science couldn't explain. The project was led by Colonel James Morrison, a career intelligence officer who had been investigating unexplained phenomena for the military since the early 90s. Morrison's team included aerospace engineers, physicists, and intelligence specialists who had top-secret clearances and extensive experience with advanced military technology. What made Project Blue Book Vietnam different from other UFO investigations was its focus on the tactical and strategic implications of unidentified aerial phenomena. The team wasn't trying to determine whether UFOs existed. They were trying to understand how these phenomena affected military operations, and whether they represented a threat to national security. Morrison's files, declassified in 2019, revealed that his team documented over 300 incidents of unidentified aerial phenomena during the Vietnam conflict. These incidents shared common characteristics that suggested they were related to a single phenomenon, rather than multiple unconnected events. The objects consistently demonstrated capabilities that exceeded known technology by decades. They could accelerate instantly, change direction without apparent regard for physics, and hover silently for extended periods. Most disturbing, they seemed to possess the ability to disable military equipment selectively, while leaving other systems unaffected. But perhaps most importantly, the incidents were affecting both American and North Vietnamese forces equally, suggesting that whatever was responsible for the phenomena wasn't taking sides in the human conflict. Chapter 3: The North Vietnamese Encounter. The first documented North Vietnamese encounter with unidentified aerial phenomena occurred on December 3. Unlike American reports, which were filed through military channels, the North Vietnamese account came from a defector who provided detailed information during debriefing sessions. Captain Nguyen Van Duc, a battery commander with the North Vietnamese Army, described an incident that paralleled American experiences with disturbing precision. According to Duke's account, his artillery unit was preparing to shell American positions when 3 stars fell from heaven and hung above our guns. The objects were described as brilliant lights arranged in a triangular formation that moved with impossible precision and speed. But what happened next terrified the North Vietnamese soldiers more than any American bombardment. Every weapon in the battery became inoperable. Artillery pieces that had been functioning perfectly suddenly refused to fire. Small arms wouldn't cycle, and even bayonets seemed to become stuck in their sheaths. For nearly 30 minutes, the entire unit was defensively helpless. Duke reported that some of his soldiers attempted to flee, but found themselves unable to run more than a few meters before becoming exhausted and disoriented. Others described feeling as though they were moving through thick liquid, with every action requiring enormous effort. Most disturbing, several soldiers reported experiencing what they described as voices in the mind, communications that bypassed normal hearing and seemed to originate from inside their own thought. These messages were described as peaceful, but incomprehensible, consisting of concepts and emotions rather than words. When the lights departed, normal physical and mental function returned immediately, but the psychological impact on the unit was devastating. Several soldiers deserted, others requested transfer to different units, and the battery's combat effectiveness was severely compromised for months. Duke's account was initially dismissed by American intelligence as propaganda or disinformation, but when his description was compared to similar reports from American forces, the parallels were too extensive to ignore. Chapter 4: The Technology Assessment. Project Blue Book. Vietnam's technical analysis team was led by Dr. Sarah Chen, an aerospace engineer who had worked on classified aircraft development programs before being assigned to UFO investigation. Chen's background in advanced propulsion systems made her uniquely qualified to evaluate the technological implications of the reported phenomena. Chen's analysis of witness accounts revealed consistent descriptions of capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about physics and engineering. The objects demonstrated instantaneous acceleration without apparent reaction mass or exhaust signatures, ability to hover silently despite having no visible means of lift generation, electromagnetic effects that could selectively disable electronic systems without causing permanent damage, apparent immunity to conventional detection methods despite being clearly visible to human observers. Most puzzling, the objects seem to violate conservation of momentum by making sharp directional changes without gradual acceleration or deceleration curves. Chen's team conducted extensive analysis of equipment that had been exposed to the phenomena, looking for residual effects that might provide clues about the underlying technology. Metal components showed microscopic crystalline changes that suggested exposure to intense electromagnetic fields, but these changes followed patterns that didn't match any known industrial processes. Electronic components that had failed during encounters showed unusual wear patterns in semiconductor junctions, as if they had been exposed to precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulses, designed to cause temporary rather than permanent failure. Most remarkably, some equipment actually functioned better after exposure to the phenomena. Radio sets showed improved reception, optical equipment had enhanced clarity, and even mechanical devices showed reduced wear and improved precision. Chen concluded that the objects represented technology that was at least 50 to 100 years ahead of current human capabilities, but her analysis also suggested that the technology was being deliberately restrained, operated in a way that minimized permanent damage to human equipment and personnel. Chapter 5. The pattern emerges. As Project Blue Book Vietnam accumulated reports from throughout Southeast Asia, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. The unidentified aerial phenomena weren't random occurrences. They were systematically observing and intervening in military operations on both sides of the conflict. Morrison's analysis revealed that UFO incidents clustered around major military operations, with sightings increasing dramatically before and during significant battles. The phenomena seemed particularly interested in observing artillery bombardments, airstrikes, and large-scale troop movements, but the interventions weren't neutral. The objects consistently acted to prevent or minimize large-scale casualties, regardless of which side was likely to suffer those casualties. During the Tet Offensive of 1968, UFO incidents were reported at multiple locations where major battles were taking place. In each case, the phenomena appeared at moments when one side or the other was preparing to launch attacks that would result in massive casualty. At Hue, North Vietnamese forces preparing to assault the Imperial Palace reported their weapons becoming inoperable just as American reinforcements arrived, potentially preventing a bloodbath. At Hussan, American B-52 bombers experienced navigation system failures that prevented them from dropping their payloads on what was later discovered to be a refugee camp that had been misidentified as a military target. The pattern suggested that the phenomena were being controlled by an intelligence that understood human warfare and was actively working to minimize its destructive impact. But this intelligence seemed to operate according to criteria that didn't align with either side's strategic objective. Morrison's team began developing a hypothesis that the unidentified aerial phenomena represented some form of extraterrestrial observation and intervention program. The objects were studying human conflict behavior while taking limited action to prevent the worst excesses of warfare. Chapter 6. The Abduction Protocol. The most classified aspect of Project Blue Book Vietnam involved cases where military personnel had direct contact with the occupants of unidentified aircraft. These incidents were classified under a special protocol that required approval from the Secretary of Defense for access to the files. The first documented abduction case occurred on January 15, 1968. When Captain Robert Hayes disappeared during a routine reconnaissance flight near the Cambodian border. Hayes's F-4 Phantom was tracked on radar until it encountered what controllers described as multiple identified contacts, before disappearing from all detection systems. Hayes reappeared 72 hours later at a different airbase, with no memory of the missing time and no explanation for how he had traveled 200 kilometers without his aircraft. Medical examination revealed no injuries, but blood tests showed unusual chemical signatures that couldn't be identified through conventional analysis. Under hypnotic regression conducted by military psychologist, Hayes recalled being taken aboard an aircraft that was bigger inside than outside, and meeting beings that communicated telepathically rather than through spoken language. According to Hayes's recovered memories, the beings were conducting what they described as conflict assessment protocols, detailed studies of human warfare designed to understand the psychological and social dynamics that led to organized violence. Hayes reported being shown images of Earth from space that revealed the global scope of human conflicts, including wars that were occurring simultaneously in other parts of the world. The beings expressed particular concern about weapons of mass destruction and the potential for human warfare to affect other inhabited worlds. Most remarkably, Hayes claimed that the beings shared information about alternative historical outcomes, showing him how the Vietnam conflict might have developed if certain key decisions had been made differently. These alternative scenarios consistently showed less destructive outcomes for all parties involved, When Hayes was returned to his normal duties, he performed with exceptional effectiveness for several months before requesting reassignment to non-combat role. Psychological evaluation revealed that his experience had fundamentally changed his understanding of warfare and his willingness to participate in activities that might result in large-scale casualty. Chapter 7. The Joint Investigation. The most extraordinary development in Project Blue Book Vietnam came in late 1968, when North Vietnamese intelligence made contact with American forces through diplomatic channels to propose a joint investigation of the UFO phenomena. The North Vietnamese had been conducting their own classified investigation of unidentified aerial phenomena, and had reached conclusions that paralleled American findings. Their files, shared through Swiss diplomatic intermediaries, documented over 200 incidents that matched the patterns identified by Morrison's team. Most remarkably, the North Vietnamese had recovered physical evidence from a UFO incident near Hanoi, a damaged object that had crashed after an encounter with North Vietnamese air defenses, yielded materials that couldn't be identified through conventional analysis. The materials showed properties that defied current understanding of metallurgy and physics. They were lighter than aluminum, but stronger than titanium, conducted electricity better than copper, but showed no magnetic properties, and maintained stable atomic structure despite exposure to extreme temperature. American and North Vietnamese scientists worked together in secret to analyze these materials, sharing data through channels that bypassed normal military command structures. This cooperation represented the only time during the Vietnam conflict that the two sides collaborated on any project. The joint analysis revealed that the materials had been manufactured using techniques that were beyond current human capabilities. Atomic-level examination showed crystalline structures that could only be created in zero-gravity environments, using precisely controlled electromagnetic fields. But perhaps most significant, isotopic analysis revealed that some elements in the materials didn't match terrestrial ratios, suggesting that they had originated outside Earth's solar system. Chapter 8. The Escalation. As Project Blue Book Vietnam's investigation progressed, the frequency and intensity of UFO encounters began to increase dramatically. By mid-1969, incidents were being reported on an almost daily basis, with multiple sightings, often occurring simultaneously at different locations. More disturbing, the phenomena began demonstrating capabilities that suggested active intelligence gathering about human military technology. Objects were observed hovering near missile sites, following reconnaissance aircraft, and positioning themselves to observe weapons testing. American intelligence became concerned that the UFO phenomena might be connected to Soviet or Chinese intelligence operations, using advanced aircraft that exceeded known technological capabilities. Despite the evidence suggesting extraterrestrial origins, military planners had to consider the possibility that human adversaries had developed breakthrough technologies that were being tested in the Vietnam theater. This concern led to several attempts to intercept and examine the unidentified objects, using advanced military aircraft and weapon systems. These encounters demonstrated that the UFOs were far more sophisticated than any known human technology. F-4 Phantom fighters equipped with the most advanced radar and missile systems of the era proved completely ineffective against the unidentified objects. The UFOs could outmaneuver missiles, disappear from radar while remaining visible to human observers, and demonstrate acceleration capabilities that would generate forces fatal to human occupants. Most disturbing, the UFOs began responding to military threats with defensive measures that suggested they were prepared for hostile encounters. Aircraft that approached too aggressively experienced system failures that forced emergency landings, while ground-based weapon systems targeting the objects suffered mysterious malfunctions that prevented engagement. These defensive responses suggested that whatever intelligence controlled the UFOs was prepared to protect itself, while avoiding actions that would cause permanent harm to human personnel. Chapter 9. The Psychological Warfare Dimension. Project Blue Book Vietnam's investigation revealed that UFO encounters were having significant psychological effects on military personnel from both sides. Soldiers who had experienced UFO incidents showed measurable changes in combat behavior, unit cohesion, and willingness to engage in aggressive military actions. Dr. Patricia Williams, the project's chief psychologist, documented a syndrome she termed cosmic perspective disorder, a psychological condition where individuals who had encountered UFO phenomena developed an altered understanding of human conflicts that reduced their effectiveness as combat personnel. Soldiers suffering from this condition showed decreased aggression, increased empathy for enemy personnel, and a tendency to question the fundamental assumptions underlying military objectives. While these changes might be considered positive from a humanitarian perspective, they represented a significant degradation of military effectiveness. Williams' research suggested that the UFO phenomena were intentionally inducing these psychological changes as part of a broader intervention strategy designed to reduce the intensity of human conflict. The beings controlling the UFOs appeared to understand human psychology well enough to calibrate their interventions for maximum effect on combat behavior. Most remarkably, soldiers who had been exposed to UFO phenomena showed enhanced problem-solving abilities and improved capacity for understanding complex systems. Intelligence tests administered before and after encounters showed significant improvements in spatial reasoning, pattern recognition, and strategic thinking. These cognitive enhancements appeared to be permanent, suggesting that contact with UFO phenomena induced neurological changes that improved human mental capabilities. But the military applications of these improvements were limited by the accompanying reduction in aggressive behavior. Chapter 10: The Enemy of My Enemy. The most significant development in Project Blue Book Vietnam came in early 1970, when both American and North Vietnamese forces encountered UFO phenomena that actively intervened to prevent a potential nuclear escalation of the conflict. President Nixon had authorized the deployment of tactical nuclear weapons to Southeast Asia as part of a contingency plan for preventing North Vietnamese victory. These weapons were positioned at secure facilities in South Vietnam and Thailand, ready for use if conventional forces proved unable to achieve American strategic objectives. On March 15, 1970, reconnaissance satellites detected large formations of unidentified objects, converging on every location where nuclear weapons were stored. The objects positioned themselves directly above the weapon storage facilities and remained stationary despite all attempts to communicate with or intercept them. Within hours, every nuclear weapon in the theater became completely inoperative. Detonation systems failed, guidance computers crashed, and even the conventional explosives used to trigger nuclear reactions became chemically and simultaneously. Similar incidents occurred at North Vietnamese facilities, where Soviet-supplied nuclear-capable missiles were being prepared for potential use against American targets. The phenomena disabled nuclear weapons on both sides with equal precision and effectiveness. The message was unmistakable. Whatever intelligence controlled the UFOs would not permit nuclear weapons to be used in the Vietnam conflict. The beings had demonstrated the capability to neutralize humanity's most destructive weapons, while leaving conventional military equipment largely unaffected. This intervention forced both sides to reconsider their strategic assumptions about the conflict. American military planners realized that their ultimate deterrent had been neutralized by forces they couldn't understand or combat. North Vietnamese strategists faced the same limitation on their own nuclear option. Chapter 11: The Cover-Up Agreement. The nuclear weapon incident created a crisis that transcended the Vietnam conflict itself. Both American and North Vietnamese governments faced the disturbing reality that extraterrestrial forces were actively intervening in human affairs and possessed the technology to neutralize Earth's most advanced military system. Through diplomatic channels that bypassed normal military command structures, representatives from both sides agreed to coordinate their responses to the UFO phenomenon. This agreement, known as the Cosmic Accord, established protocols for sharing UFO intelligence while maintaining secrecy about extraterrestrial intervention. The Cosmic Accord represented an unprecedented level of cooperation between enemies who had been fighting a brutal war for over a decade. Both sides recognized that the UFO phenomena posed questions that were more significant than their territorial and ideological dispute. Under the terms of the agreement, Both American and North Vietnamese forces, which share all UFO intelligence through neutral intermediaries, coordinate responses to UFO incidents to minimize misunderstanding, maintain absolute secrecy about extraterrestrial interventions, avoid actions that might provoke hostile UFO responses, develop joint contingency plans for potential UFO threats. The agreement also established a framework for post-war cooperation in UFO research and established the foundation for ongoing intelligence sharing that continues to this day. Most importantly, the Cosmic Accord included provisions for gradually ending the Vietnam conflict in ways that would minimize the risk of attracting further UFO intervention. Both sides agreed that continued escalation of the conflict might provoke responses from the extraterrestrial observers that could be catastrophic for humanity. Chapter 12. The Gradual Withdrawal. The influence of UFO phenomena on the Vietnam conflict became evident in the gradual de-escalation that began in 1970 and continued until the American withdrawal in 1975. While public accounts attributed this de-escalation to political and military factors, classified files reveal that UFO considerations played a significant role in strategic decision-making on both sides. American military planners were forced to abandon strategies that might provoke UFO intervention, including large-scale bombing campaigns, chemical warfare escalation, and any consideration of nuclear weapons use. These limitations significantly reduced American military options and contributed to the decision to seek a negotiated settlement. North Vietnamese strategy was similarly affected by UFO consideration. Plans for massive offensives that would result in catastrophic casualties were abandoned in favor of more limited operations that were less likely to attract extraterrestrial attention. The result was a conflict that gradually wound down through mutual exhaustion, rather than decisive military victory by either side. While this outcome was frustrating for military leaders who sought clear resolution, it may have prevented escalations that could have triggered more dramatic UFO intervention. Project Blue Book Vietnam was officially terminated in 1973, but its files were transferred to a successor organization that continued monitoring UFO activity throughout the region. The final report, completed in 1975, concluded that extraterrestrial forces had successfully prevented the Vietnam conflict from escalating beyond acceptable limits, while gathering extensive data about human warfare. The report's most significant finding was that UFO intervention had probably prevented World War III. Without extraterrestrial restraints, the Vietnam conflict might have escalated to include nuclear weapons use, which could have triggered global conflict between superpowers. Epilogue. The secret that changed everything. The UFO dimension of the Vietnam War remained classified for over 50 years, hidden in archives that were accessible only to the highest levels of government and military leadership. But the impact of these encounters continues to influence policy and strategy in ways that the public has never understood. Modern military doctrine includes contingency plans for UFO intervention that were developed based on lessons learned in Vietnam. Rules of engagement have been modified to minimize the risk of actions that might provoke extraterrestrial responses. Weapons development programs include assessments of potential UFO countermeasures. Most significantly, the Cosmic Accord established diplomatic channels between former enemies that have prevented several potential conflicts from escalating to catastrophic level. American and Russian intelligence services maintain ongoing cooperation in UFO matters that transcends their political disagreement. The veterans of Project Blue Book Vietnam carried their knowledge into senior positions throughout the American defense establishment, where they have quietly influenced policy for decades. Their understanding of extraterrestrial capabilities has shaped decisions about military spending, weapons development, and strategic planning. Today, as humanity faces new challenges and conflict, the lessons learned from UFO encounters in Vietnam continue to provide guidance for leaders who understand that Earth is not alone in the universe, and that human conflicts are being observed by intelligences that possess the power to intervene when necessary. The Vietnam War was the first conflict in which extraterrestrial forces played an active role in limiting human destruction, but according to sources familiar with ongoing UFO monitoring programs, it will not be the last. The sky above Vietnam revealed truths that changed everything about how humanity understands its place in the universe. Those truths remain classified, but their influence continues to shape the world in ways that most people never imagined. The war that was supposed to be about ideology and territory became humanity's first documented encounter with cosmic intelligence, and that intelligence is still watching, still evaluating, and still prepared to intervene if human conflicts threaten to exceed acceptable limits. Project Blue Book Vietnam proved that humanity is not alone, but it also proved that we are not in control of our own destiny. When that destiny includes the potential for self-destruction, the watchers in the sky have been patient, but their patience is not unlimited. And the next time humanity approaches the brink of catastrophic conflict, the intervention may not be as gentle as what occurred above the jungles of Vietnam.